Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Nina. I'm an ADHD coach, and as someone with ADHD myself, I can completely relate to so many of the struggles of the people I work with, including what we're talking about today, which in my opinion is one of the biggest ways that we can set ourselves up for failure when it comes to cleaning and decluttering. Yet it's a strategy that for some reason we all keep running back to, even though it never works out for us. So today I want to talk about why it doesn't work for us and how it usually just ends up making us feel terrible about ourselves, but also how we can take the idea of this strategy but execute it in a way that we can actually get ourselves to do. So the strategy I'm talking about is something that I call the catch-up day. This seems to be our go-to method when we realize our home looks like a complete disaster and that we're way behind on everything that needs to get done. So we tell ourselves that we are going to dedicate an entire day or an entire weekend even to tackling all of our cleaning and decluttering. In our mind, the strategy makes perfect sense because we forget we have ADHD and we convince ourselves that the problem has simply been a lack of time. So, of course, we think that if we just give ourselves the time we need, that we'll be able to get through everything that we need to get through. But when that catch-up day is finally here, one of two things always seems to happen. Either we get completely overwhelmed because we have no plan for the day and no motivation or dopamine to actually complete any tasks, so we end up giving up, or we start out pretty productive, but then we begin to get distracted by less important tasks that are a little bit more interesting to us. Or we think of things that we do want to do, and we think that if we don't take care of them in that exact second, then we're going to forget about them. So we stop whatever we are doing in that moment so we can take care of them, but then we forget to go back to the original tasks. And at the end of the day, we can just work for hours and hours and hours and really have nothing to show for it because the tasks that really did need to get done still have not been accomplished. And I think what makes this even worse is that when these things happen, we end up feeling completely defeated, like we are a complete failure, and we end up really having a big hit to our self-esteem. But why does this keep happening? Why can't we just power through and get these things done? Well, because we have ADHD, and this strategy goes against everything we know about how our brains work. And I know it just feels so frustrating and so unfair because most neurotypical people can use this strategy. It can be a really successful thing for them. But we do not have the executive function skills to truly be able to accomplish anything productive if we do not have structure and a very specific plan. And also, just asking ourselves to do something that we do not enjoy for an entire day is going to be really hard and completely unrealistic unless there is some sense of urgency. If our brain knows that it can get away with not doing these things and still be able to function and survive, there is a very good chance that we're not even going to be able to initiate these tasks, let alone actually complete them. But like I said earlier, there are a few things that I've found that can help make this strategy a lot more realistic and a lot more effective for us. So let's talk about some easy things that we can do to help us make the most out of a catch-up day. Now, firstly, before we even get to the strategies, I want to quickly mention that if there is any way for you to add a sense of urgency to this process, you are immediately going to find motivation that you never thought you could have. There is no time my home is cleaner than when I have some kind of inspection coming up, or someone has to come and fix something, or I have invited guests to come over later on that evening. I have learned that if you really, really want to get cleaning done, give yourself a reason to get it done. You can invite friends over for the next day or have a reward planned that requires the space to be clean, like decorating for the holidays if that's something that you enjoy, or finally having the space to start on a creative project. Again, it's just going to be really hard for our brain to take cleaning seriously if it really doesn't feel like it's a pressing need or there's nothing really exciting in it for us. And that is why creating a sense of urgency really does help us to get motivated. But let's go ahead now and talk about some practical strategies. Now, I go into much greater detail about many of these in the videos that you can find in my ADHD cleaning and decluttering playlist that I will link down below. But here are some key points to remember. Firstly, have a plan, a detailed plan that prioritizes exactly what needs to get done and in what order. The last thing we want to do is spend the entire day trying to figure that out or getting completely distracted by things that are not nearly as important. And this priority list and plan needs to be made well in advance. What I like to do when I have a catch-up day coming up is to leave out a list for like a week and then just kind of add to it as I think of things. And then the night before, I go through the list and I figure out what the most essential things are so they can be my areas of focus. Now, the second thing to remember is to go into the day with a rule of not starting on anything else until the initial task is complete. Now, of course, because of our creative brains, we are always going to think of other fantastic things that we would love to get accomplished, but just remember that they are all simply distractions from our priorities. So write them down as things that you want to accomplish in the future, but promise yourself no side quests. Now, another thing to remember is that every big task needs to be broken down into specific steps on our list, or we will get completely overwhelmed. So for example, we can't just write down something like clean the office. We have to be way more specific than that. We have to give ourselves actual steps to check off of a list, like declutter the desk or organize the paper or dump the trash bin, things like that. Because if we just give ourselves a vague direction to go in, we're really not going to know where to start. And knowing how our brain works, we're just going to find these fun little things to keep us occupied that don't really lead to any progress. So help yourself out by giving yourself this very detailed list that outlines every single step of a broken down task. Now, another important thing is to try to make the process as enjoyable as possible so we actually want to continue. For me, that means listening to my favorite music or podcast on my headphones. I know better than to turn on the actual television, or I will end up watching it and sitting down. But these things do help me to keep going a lot longer. Another thing that you can try is to create little fun challenges for yourself, like seeing how much you can get done in 10 or 15 minutes, or telling your friend that you are going to send them a photo every half hour so they can see your progress. I use both of these tricks specifically, and I do find them to be very helpful. Now, another thing we have to remember is that people with ADHD work much better with time-based goals than outcome-based goals because we have a clear endpoint. So if you're really struggling with motivation or task initiation, another great tip is to simply tell yourself that you only need to work on the task for a specific amount of time, even if it's just for 5 minutes, because that suddenly makes the task a lot less daunting and a lot more achievable. And once the timer goes off, you can at that point decide if you really do want to be done or if you actually want to continue, because most of the time once we're involved with a task, we do want to keep going a little bit longer. But really the key here is to give ourselves structure, direction, and urgency. This is the only way to prevent overwhelm and give ourselves a fighting chance to actually get this stuff done. And we also have to remember to give ourselves so much compassion, love, patience, and understanding during this process, because we can't forget that cleaning is something that people with ADHD can struggle with the most. But even so, if you implement these strategies, I can assure you that your next catch-up day will be your most productive and effective one so far, and you will walk away feeling like you actually accomplished something. But that is it for today. I hope you found today's video to be helpful and validating. You can find the entire ADHD cleaning and decluttering playlist in the description box. I want to thank you so much for being here. Please know that we are in this together, and I will see you in the next video.